Day 178, 1 Kings chapter 17, 18 and 19. Welcome to Scripture Whispers. When God told Elijah to hide by the Kerith ravine, he promised to provide for him. During a severe drought, ravens brought Elijah bread and meat every morning and evening. Think about that for a moment. Ravens are not known for sharing food, yet God used an unlikely source to meet Elijah's needs. Don't limit God's provision to your expectations. Many of us have already decided how God should answer our prayers. We expect help from a certain person, a certain job, a certain opportunity, or a certain timeline. But God often provides through doors we never imagined. The lesson is not to focus on the ravens, the lesson is to trust the provider. God sent Elijah to a widow in Zarephath. When he arrived, she was preparing what she believed would be her last meal, before she and her sons starved. Yet Elijah told her not to be afraid, and to first make a small loaf of bread for him. That request didn't make sense. But the widow obeyed. And God miraculously ensured that her flour and oil never ran out. Faith is trusting God when the numbers don't add up. Sometimes God asks us to take a step before we see the outcome. We may not understand why, but obedience opens the door for God's provision. Later, the widow's son became ill and died. Imagine her grief. Elijah cried out to God, and God restored the boy's life. This miracle reminds us that God is not only concerned with droughts, finances, and public victories. He also cares about private heartbreak. Nothing that breaks your heart is too small for God. The God who controls nations also sees tears on a pillow at night. He is present in grief, loss, disappointment, and unanswered questions. On Mount Carmel, Elijah challenged the people of Israel. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The people said nothing. Many people today are not openly rejecting God, they are simply undecided. They want God's blessings, while still allowing other things to rule their hearts: status, money, approval, comfort, or success. A divided heart produces a divided life. Eventually, every person must decide what truly sits on the throne of their life. The prophets of Baal spent hours shouting, dancing, and pleading for fire from heaven. Nothing happened. Then Elijah prayed a simple prayer. God answered with fire that consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and even the water. What a moment! God's power does not depend on human performance. We live in a world that often celebrates noise, hype, and appearances. Yet God is not impressed by spectacle. He is looking for sincere faith. Sometimes the most powerful prayers are the simplest ones. After witnessing one of the greatest miracles in Scripture, Elijah received a threat from Queen Jezebel. Suddenly, the courageous prophet became afraid. He ran away, sat under a broom bush, and asked God to let him die. This is one of the most relatable moments in the Bible. One chapter earlier, Elijah stood boldly before hundreds of false prophets. Now he felt defeated and hopeless. Even strong people get tired. Spiritual victories do not automatically remove emotional struggles. Faithful people can still experience discouragement, fear, loneliness, and burnout. And God is not shocked by any of it. In this passage, notice God's response to Elijah. God did not begin with a lecture. He sent an angel. Elijah slept, he ate, he drank. Then he rested again. Only after strengthening Elijah physically did God continue the conversation. Your spiritual health and physical health are connected. Sometimes what looks like a spiritual crisis is partly exhaustion. God understands our humanity. There are moments when rest, nourishment, and recovery become part of God's healing process. Elijah stood on the mountain. A powerful wind came. God was not in the wind. An earthquake came. God was not in the earthquake. A fire came. God was not in the fire. Then came a gentle whisper. And Elijah recognized God's voice. This may be the most beautiful lesson in these chapters. Not every message from God arrives loudly. We often expect dramatic signs and extraordinary experiences. Yet God frequently speaks through scripture, prayer, wise counsel, quiet reflection, and gentle convictions in our hearts. If our lives are constantly filled with noise, we may miss what God is saying. Sometimes the greatest spiritual breakthrough comes in stillness. As we step back and look at all we read today, we see a remarkable picture of God. He provides food through ravens. He multiplies a widow's resources. He restores a child to life. He answers with fire from heaven. He cares for an exhausted prophet. And he speaks through a gentle whisper. The same God who worked in Elijah's life still invites us to trust him today. So remember, God can sustain you in unusual ways. Obedience often comes before understanding. God cares about your deepest pain. A divided heart produces a divided life. God's power does not depend on human performance. Even strong people get tired. Sometimes the first thing God gives is rest, and God still speaks in the quiet places. May these whispers remind you that God is present in provision, in challenges, in victories, in exhaustion, and even in the silence.